When teams design a path forward, reflection on the past is a critical step that is often missed. In this episode of This Meeting Sucks, we're going to walk you through part one of the third phase in our MeetingMakers Framework, aligning, focused on the past. We will discuss the importance of looking back before moving forward and take you through our History Map Agenda template, which you can access for free on Session Lab using the link in the description.
I'm your host, Lauren Green, meeting coach and facilitation trainer, here to help you unsuck your meetings one episode at a time. I've helped hundreds of professionals and organizations through leading inclusive, engaging, and productive meetings, and now I'm offering this podcast to help you do the same. Think of this podcast as an ongoing workshop, where each time you tune in, you'll get a bite-sized nugget of knowledge you can apply right away. If you lead meetings or might someday, you're in the right place. Let's make your meetings work.
It had been a tough year of COVID, and tensions were running high at one software tech company. In addition to the organization going fully remote, the tech division's director made a massive departmental shift to flatten the organization and transition the project manager role to a coaching role. The 7 division directors gathered together to unpack and understand the full extent of recent events, the good and the bad. Over the first hour of our in-person meeting, we created a visual timeline or graphic history of the past year, charting key events, the impact on the organization, and lessons learned. As the participants stepped back from the visual timeline, one director remarked, "Wow, we did a lot." There were nods around the room as the team realized that, despite having walked into the room feeling like they didn't have much to show for the past year, they had in fact achieved a great deal. It was a simple process, but it was this simple act of writing out events as a timeline that enabled the group to learn and grow, not as individuals running individual functions, but as a cohesive leadership team collaboratively supporting a common goal. Taking time to look back is one of the most commonly missed steps when teams align on their path forward. Often, time is the reason. If you only have an hour for a goal-setting meeting, you're not going to take time for reflection. We've all experienced difficult changes in life, but we often approach personal change differently than change experienced at work. If you've gone through a tough time and started seeing a therapist or a counselor, you probably weren't setting a year's worth of goals in the first session. You need to understand what you've been through first before you're ready to move forward. The same can be said for teams, especially when they have been through a major change, whether it be related to staffing, structure, or tasks. The Bridges model for change helps clarify why it's important to unpack the past before moving forward. Developed by William Bridges, the Bridges model is a framework for effectively managing organizational and personal transitions. It consists of 3 key stages: endings, neutral zone, and new beginnings. In endings, we acknowledge and let go of old ways, roles, or structures that are no longer relevant or sustainable. In the neutral zone, we must navigate the discomfort and ambiguity of transition during a period of uncertainty and exploration. In new beginnings, we embrace and implement new practices, roles, or strategies. In this episode, we're focused on endings. Endings are both about letting go of the old and also about identifying the strengths of the past that we want to bring forward. You've probably participated in a retrospective before, a meeting where we look at what worked and any lessons learned from a project or time period. We covered this in Season 2, Episode 10, Debrief Meetings. In the CFO Bookshelf podcast, Rick Mora, author of Beyond the Wall of Resistance, discusses a change management workshop he led with an executive group going through a merger. He recalls a breakthrough moment when someone in the organization compared their old organization to a departed cat, saying, "We just need to bury the cat." Later in the workshop, following breakout group discussions, One group presented the metaphorical casket that they had created for the old organization, and the room erupted in laughter as they proceeded to hold a mock funeral service. This moment was critical for the executive team to be ready to move forward, embrace the merger, and any opportunities it presented. Aligning on the past takes a few forms. Retrospectives and faux funerals are both great activities that check this box. The activity that we're going to focus on for the remainder of this episode is a history map. There are many variations of history maps. One of our favorites is by The Grove. They call their history map a graphic history. It's linked in the description, and you can buy this template as an image file that can be added to an online whiteboard, a PowerPoint template, and in many printable sizes. A history map is essentially a timeline. Along the bottom are critical dates, and across the top are key events and lessons learned. Usually, it's helpful to have rows or swim lanes to help organize information. Perhaps lessons learned go across the top, while key events are lower down. The Growth version includes goals at the top and people/places along the bottom. Shortly, when we walk through our history map agenda, we will give you some options that you can use for swim lanes. How you decide to group key information is up to you and what you think will work best for your team. So why do a history map? If you recall from our opening example, visually mapping events and insights enabled a division leadership team to align around a common understanding of the past year with very little conflict and tension. Visual processes in general help groups problem solve while directing any negative energy towards a visual rather than towards each other, enabling participants to have tough conversations in a constructive way. History maps can also reveal unrealized trends or missing information. While doing this exercise as a 30-year look back with a group of high school arts program educators, they realized that they had large gaps of time that they couldn't fill in. The visual of the blank space of the history chart provided a key reflection moment. The most important benefit of a history map is that it provides a mechanism for the group to share stories and insights. Even if the map isn't complete, the act of doing this exercise as a team builds an important shared understanding of the past and gets everyone on the same page ready to move forward. A graphic history is particularly helpful when you have new team members coming on board who may need to be filled in on key past events. Some groups even polish up their timeline and include it in their new employee onboarding process. After the break, we will walk you through our agenda for history maps and give you tips for adapting this tool to your unique team needs. We will also include a few reflection questions to help spark a conversation and make this exercise particularly impactful. You can find our free Session Lab template linked in the description, along with our mural, online whiteboard, or printer-friendly poster templates available for purchase. If you're listening to this podcast before June 2025 and want to get your hands on an opportunity to learn from me live, you are in luck. This summer is our third annual MeetingMakers Academy, and this year we are offering 3 levels so that you can find the right training for each member of your team. We recommend Level 1 for anyone who participates in meetings, which is most of us. Level 2 and 3 will dive further into meeting preparation and management and are recommended for anyone who leads meetings. All of the sessions will take place on Fridays, May 30th through July 11th, skipping the July 4th holiday from 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. Eastern U.S. By signing up, you will get a hands-on opportunity to design a meeting, practice facilitating, and receive on-the-spot feedback to help you become more confident in your ability to lead inclusive, engaging, and productive meetings. Learn more and sign up at makemeetings.work/academy. Early bird pricing ends on April 30th, and registration ends on May 29th. So act fast to get your spot today. So now I'm going to walk you through our history map agenda template. Again, you can grab this in the description through Session Lab. I'll walk you through each part and give you guidance, but as always, feel free to deviate from this guidance depending on the size of the group and also your unique needs. Our agenda kicks us off at 9 a.m. with a welcome and kickoff from the team leader or sponsor, just inviting team members to participate in an activity where we're going to understand the past to help prepare for the future. After that, the facilitator, which in this case could also be the team leader, will then clarify the meeting flow and offer agreements for success. In our agenda template, we actually walk through how to tee up meeting agreements, how to choose them, and some suggested agreements that you could use for this meeting. Next, we give time to do introductions. If most people in the room already know each other, then just doing a quick check-in is probably enough. But if you do have new team members, then briefly just ask people to introduce themselves with their name and their roles. A tip might be to invite people to share a hope for the meeting to make this more personal, and we always recommend modeling or demonstrating what you want them to say in advance just to save time. After introductions, we've got an energizer here. This energizer is learning symbols, and we learned this from our colleague Dean Myers at VisWorld. And in learning symbols, participants are asked to think about what they've learned through their work experiences. The instructions are to provide participants with a sticky note or a piece of paper, something they can draw with, and then they draw a circle about the size of a golf ball. So pretty small, shouldn't stress anyone out. Then you ask participants to make marks on and around the circle to create a symbol that represents a key professional learning from over the past year. And then each person shares. In an online variation, you can ask participants to show their symbol on their webcam or take a photo and share it in the chat or online whiteboard. Now we get into the history map portion. We've given this an hour and 30 minutes because it can take a little while. Remember, the goal of a history map is to build a collective understanding of past events and generate insights that will help enable teams align more easily on their path forward. First, explain the purpose of the history map. The purpose of a history map is to fill in new team members on key events, celebrations, and lessons learned from the past, especially those that shape our work now and that we want to bring forward into the future. Next, if there is an existing history chart or timeline of events that has been created or discussed already, take a moment to review. I've had some groups I've worked with want to pre-create their history map in advance. I think it's just important to have anything that's been pre-generated on sticky notes or printer paper and stick them on the wall in order so there's room for people to add and move things around, which is a really important aspect of this activity. So if there's anything existing, ask the group to take a moment to review. And if there hasn't been anything pre-created, then ask the group what kind of time frame they would like to go back to. For example, are we going back to 2020, 2010? And write this date or year on a sticky note or whatever the virtual equivalent of the sticky note is and place it on the bottom left of your board. And then we're going to build from left to right on our timeline. You want to make sure that you've got enough space to the right to really build this thing out. Then once you've got that first year established, you can put subsequent years or periods of time across the bottom just so that people can see all the timeline milestones from where you've been to where you are now. If you're going back 10 years, you could do one sticky note per year. If you're only going back a year, you could do months. So you've got the timeline established, and then you're going to invite individuals to silently brainstorm as many key events and trends, both internal and external, as they can think of, and write all of those events and trends down on their own sticky notes. So one event or trend per sticky note. After about 10 minutes or whenever you observe that most people are done, you're going to invite the group to work in pairs or trios to share the events and trends that they came up with and consolidate them for about another 10 minutes or so. This is a really important step because most of the time people have duplicates. You don't want to deal with more sticky notes than you need to. So they're combining their sticky notes in pairs and trios, and then You can combine pairs and trios into larger groups of 4 to 6 to further consolidate their events for about 15 minutes. They don't need to select their top ones, but you just want them to remove their duplicates. Some groups might have 5, some groups might have 20. That's okay, as long as we only have events and trends that are not duplicates. If you've got groups that are larger than 20, then you're going to repeat this consolidation process once more. Then, as a full group, you're going to spend about 45 to 60 minutes sharing events and trends and adding them to the board. The way that I like to do this is by first asking who has one event or trend that they are excited to map, and then add their sticky note to the board. Then tell the other groups that if they have exactly the same event, to then remove it from their pile so they're not putting up the same events. And then the process repeats. So ask, does anyone have an event or trend that goes with or adds to this one? And then you're going to add the new sticky notes to the board. When you're working with stickies, as opposed to writing directly on a really big piece of paper or a whiteboard, this makes it a lot easier to move things around and you won't have to measure anything. Don't start your timeline all the way to the left. If you do that, then as the group remembers things that happened before that date, they won't have space to add them. So give yourself a little wiggle room. As it seems helpful, you can draw lines and arrows to connect related events and trends. So this process continues until all the sticky notes are mapped, and the map can really look as messy as it needs to. The biggest thing that I get a little particular about, okay, fine, a lot particular about, is when sticky notes are covered up. Because when you photograph them, you're not going to be able to read them. Oh, and please don't write in pen. If you write in pen, you're not going to be able to read it once you photograph the sticky notes. In this process, it's normal for conversations to go down rabbit holes or what seems like rabbit holes. And my suggestion is actually to let the rabbit holes happen, because a lot of times what's actually happening there is the group is talking about the past and they're learning. So just wait for the conversation to come to a natural stopping point and remind them where they left off on the timeline, and then just continue the mapping process. You really only need to cut it off if you're really running out of time. And if it seems like the conversation is valuable, then just pause where you are and pick it up in a future meeting. In other words, don't rush this process. It doesn't benefit you to rush it. Another tip is to consider adding swim lanes. If you've ever done a Gantt chart, then you can think of down the left-hand side, you have different swim lanes or rows of activities. In a basic history chart, you're just going to have a timeline on along the bottom and then events and trends anywhere along the top. But you could also add some rows to help categorize the information. In general, you would put broader categories like trends or strategies higher up, and more specific details like events or people coming going along the bottom. And if you work on stickies, you don't have to know what those swim lanes are when you start. You can add categories if any clear groupings emerge during the mapping process. In my toolkit, I like to have some larger sticky notes like 3x5 or 6x8 to map out these categories as they emerge. Some of the categories we've used in the past are internal trends, as in new technologies the company is using, or an HR trend. An external trend could be something happening in the global economy, or if you're working at the team level, an external trend could potentially be something happening somewhere else in the company, but it's still external to your team. Strategies may be something that you tried in the past. Lessons learned and insights, maybe there were some big aha moments. I like mapping lessons learned to key events. So a key event happens, we learned something from it. So let's map the key event and the lesson learned. And you can map those on 2 different parts of the timeline or 2 different levels of the timeline if you've got these swim lanes. A few more swim lanes for you if you want to try these out. You can have a swim lane for products and tools that the group is trying out. Maybe you have a swim lane for new customers or customers coming and going or projects coming and going. Lastly, you might want to have a swim lane for people, as in team members leaving or joining, and potentially places like moving offices or even starting a new location. One of the last tips we have is if someone voices something that doesn't seem like an event, map it anyway. It matters more that the person feels heard and that insight is captured than the map being 100% perfect or accurate. So if somebody says something that doesn't fit, just say, oh, okay, how would you like me to capture that and where do you think it goes? So that was the big activity. It took about 90 minutes potentially, and now you're going to take a break. And our agenda, we're just about around 11:30, and we're going to hit the most important part of this activity, which is the reflection period. So this is a time when team members can take a step back and generate insights from the mapping, as in, okay, we just did all of these things. Now, what the heck are we actually going to do with it? You want to come up with a few questions that will help prompt reflection. If you've got groups of 8 to 10 or fewer, you can do this as a large group, but for groups that are larger than 10, we recommend using breakout groups of maybe 3 to 8 participants per group. Here are some of our questions, and we've got these all in our agenda, so you don't have to take copious notes. You can just grab our agenda. These are all in there. You're not going to ask all of these, so pick a few. What was the experience of this activity like for you? What do you notice? Where do you see gaps? Where are there periods of intense activity? What worked for us? What could have gone better? If this map could talk, what would it tell us? I love that one. What did we learn here? What will we do better next time? What would you like to take away from this activity as we move forward? What was the value of doing this activity? How would you like to use this beyond today? Now, if you were listening closely, you will notice that we started with asking about the experience. So that's kind of going to the balcony. Then we asked about what they notice and see. Then we start to generate insights like what worked and what didn't work. And then we take it forward. So we're actually kind of going from past to future just in how we're asking these insight questions. As people are talking, we definitely recommend capturing some insights on a flip chart, or you could always ask for a volunteer to do that so you don't have to facilitate and capture at the same time, or maybe just have someone take notes and share their screen. Just make sure these insights are captured because these insights are going to be really important as you move forward to not just understanding the past, but understanding present, which is going to be our next agenda. And you can build on the insights in that. Lastly, in the reflection, you can include some deeper questions to kind of probe a little bit deeper in the conversation. So someone says something interesting, you could say, oh, well, what does that tell us? Or what might have been going on there? Or who can add to that? And those are probing questions to build deeper into a certain conversation area. We've given that reflection period about 30 minutes. If you did this in breakout groups, it could take a little bit longer because you would want to give time for each breakout group to share a few of their insights with the larger group. But assuming it took about 30 minutes, then we're getting to 12 in our version of the agenda, where we would get parting words from the leader, sharing appreciation, and clarifying next steps. Before we close out this episode, I just want to mention that this is a really good activity to update periodically. We've worked with one consulting group where they had done a 15 or 20-year history map, and then we helped them map an additional 5 years, and they continue to keep this updated. It can be a really good team building activity and also just an important moment for the group to step back and say, wow, look at everything we've done. Look at where we've been. And when people are on the same page, it develops trust. And in the last episode, we talked about how important trust is and how trust enables constructive conflict. So this activity of really tuning the past helps everybody move forward on the same page. So we can't say it enough that doing a history map, doing a retrospective, looking back is so important for groups to be able to move forward. Just remember that looking back isn't about being stuck in the past. It's about letting go of what doesn't serve us anymore and holding on to the things that bring us success. In the next episode, we are going to continue our aligning journey moving from aligning on the past into aligning on the present. It's been a pleasure to do this look back with you, meeting makers. Let's make your meetings work.
This podcast was written by Lauren Green and produced by Caitlin Murray. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a few seconds to rate and review so future meeting makers can find our community. You can find our next Meeting Makers Academy workshop on our website at www.makemeetings.work/academy. Want help with your next meeting? Reach out at makemeetings.work/contact and we'll set up time to chat.